Good afternoon, this is Jeff with Sewer Tech Northwest. We are at 7355 Southwest Fairway Loop here in Wilsonville. I describe everything as if you're standing in the street facing the front of the house. We are to the right of the doorway. Best landmark here, this cleanout lines up perfectly with the left side edge. You've got this pop-out window here where the master bathroom is. It lines up perfectly with this left side edge of this window frame on the frontmost window on the flat part of that pop-out. 3-inch ABS, the other, easy way to find it, the thing lines up absolutely perfectly with where the sewer line exits the foundation of the house, and it's just barely below the bark dust. Like maybe a ½ inch underneath it. You've got a 3-inch ABS cleanout. We're going to check the overall condition and serviceability of the sanitary sewer line. Water is running. We're going to zero out the foot counter here. Off we go. A little bit of grease buildup in the flow line. We'll see how that looks on the way out when the line's fully drained. Swapping over there to 4-inch PVC pipe. Not an outrageous amount of grease buildup, and honestly, once my camera busts through a bit of that stuff, natural water flow coming out of the house usually deals with it pretty effectively. Once you're beyond the first 5-10 feet or so, it dissipates off pretty nicely. But I will run backwards, see if any of that stuff persists back into the house, to any significance anyway. Otherwise, it's actually quite a clean sewer line. Most of the pipe beyond about the first 10 feet or so has a very clean flow line. Most people in this neck of the woods are usually in their retirement years, and most of these folks grew up in a generation of, many of them were on septics as kids. They had good flushing habits pounded into their heads by their parents. You abuse those old things and they tend to let you know about it. Right, getting into a spot here with a little bit of debris and standing water. But we'll see how that looks coming out the other end here. We're a good distance from the house at that point. We're getting 60 plus feet out. Standing water at this distance from the home is, unless there's nothing else hiding in there, like roots or something like that, we'll get a better view of that on the way out. And I'll do a few toilet flushes to help clear any debris out of the line. But when you start getting that distance from the house, we've even got a little bit of stuff going on here. It, generally speaking, takes a great deal of abuse to ever develop a blockage and a backup from those distances. And by that I mean flushing paper towels, wipes, lots of grease, stuff like that. If you can imagine a blockage even forming out at 60-something feet out, you have to fill up at least that much pipe to get back to the fountain. Probably another, although you've got a tub right inside this window, so you're having to fill up probably a good 65 feet of pipe. Plastic pipe, which is nice and smooth on the inside. As long as your blockage is made of proper items and not improper items, I don't scope sewer lines for the sake of allowing them to be abused. A toilet paper blockage at 60-something feet out has very little chance of withstanding the head pressure that develops behind 65 feet of pipe. That is a seriously long sewer line, though. I am amazed at how long this thing is. Not the distance I thought I was going to be scoping here. This is like a flag lot sewer line. There's the main there. And after 13 years and 24,000 plus sewer scopes later, lines that push over 100 feet, unless they are pitched up on a very steep hillside where you have tons of natural slope and grade, bellies are to be expected. There's very few sewer lines out there that are 100 plus feet long that don't have bellies, and usually what you're getting is a 20-30 foot section of pipe with inches of standing water. So far in this line here, the worst I've seen is around 1 inch. So anyway, we'll revisit that on the way back out, but considering the length this line is, the settling we're seeing here is actually quite minimal for the kind of line you have here. All right, located the camera head successfully. The line here essentially does a dead straight shot all the way to the main. And it terminates, you've got that big, huge island strip that goes down the middle of the road here. The line terminates almost up against the curb on the far side of it. In the grass area is where I'm picking that locate up. But just before you get to the other side of the island and go into the roadway. And then this is if you're standing, again, in the road, all the way, on the far side of the road facing this house. right at the very end of that island, what lines up with this perfectly, you'll see a manhole. The manhole actually says storm on it. That's either for an actual storm system, or they just decided to use the wrong labeled manhole, which happens more often than you think it does. Anyway, that lines up with where the line is terminating, and they'll often run sewer mains and storm mains in almost the exact same ditch. So they're usually right in line with each other. Okay, but line is just about done draining off here. I did about 3 toilet flushes from every single toilet in the house to help clear any debris out of that belly so we can get our most accurate look at it. This thing dives like no tomorrow at the end here. By the time you hit that main, I can barely locate it. It's so deep. You're probably pushing, I didn't take a depth there, but just based on how hard we dove, you're probably got a 12 to 14 foot deep main there. Way, way down there. And this water you're seeing right here, this is still trickling off. That is not standing water there. You just have some toilets in the house that I think probably have older components in them, and those often take a while for the flapper to close. It's not usually until the toilet tank fills all the way to the top before it finally puts enough pressure on the valve to shut it. That belly's behind us a ways too, and as my camera moves through there, it'll often slosh a little bit of water loose from the belly. All right, we're getting out towards the very tail end of some standing water here, around 90 feet. And again, you can see water is still moving through the line there. The amount of standing water, that was very short-lived, what we're going through, but I mean, we're going back into another spot here. So if you were to actually fix that belly, which thus far I am not recommending you do, you would have to take that repair out to 90 feet, as that standing water does persist out to that point. It tapers off to almost nothing, but we're starting to come out of the belly now at about 77 feet. And at that worst point there, you're hovering right around the 1 inch of standing water mark. And we'll see if we have any more back here. I want to say, yeah, there we go. And I'm going to write this up as basically one belly. They're so close to each other, there's no reason to separate them. They're only separated by a couple feet. And this standing water here, you've got about a 1/4 inch of water there. Thus far, anyway. Now we're getting up to closer to 1 inch. All right, your standing water here starts at about 57 feet. So breaks in between these bellies. You actually have 3 bellies here in total, and you've got 3 to 5 feet or so of pipe in between each one that drains off almost completely. So it's not just one solid belly, and not the entire thing is at 1 inch of standing water. You've got a lot of parts of this where you're hovering around 1/4 of an inch. So it ranges from 1/4 inch to 1 inch of standing water. Anyway, you have some very, very light film at the top of the pipe, which indicates at some point in the past, it's when you get a very thin film like that, it's very common for anywhere. I mean, you can imagine you've got standing water there all the time. When someone takes a nice hot shower for a while, that whole belly gets filled in with hot water. You've got hot, steamy water that steams up. It condenses at the top of the pipe, and you often will get mold, mildew, fungus that grows at the top of the sewer line, and you'll often develop a thin layer there. That layer is so thin, I can't even tell you it relates to any blockages that have even occurred in the past. But the layer of buildup there is so thin, I would only imagine maybe one blockage could have even happened under a pretty heavy abusive situation. That buildup, though, does not persist back to the house in a way that indicates backups are occurring out of it. And I wouldn't expect it. you have these dives like this, they're the entire way out. Right here, you're dropping almost straight vertically down. This line has a lot of fall to it overall. Tons of grade. So that's not a belly there that is concerning. It's a fairly lengthy section of pipe, but it's a really long distance from the house. And all the rest of the line here, very clean. I mean, I can't even really recommend cleaning on this thing. The belly has a little bit of substance in it. Most of it's just the murkiness of toilet paper traveling through it from time to time, breaking down into a little bit of sediment. There's no buildup there hardly to speak of. My camera went through a little bit, and bellies are going to have a little bit of debris in them. That's just the nature of them. The important thing is whatever you're putting down the line, and this goes for any sewer line, whether it's got a belly or not, you want to put proper things down. It's stuff that disintegrates properly. Anyway, that belly there, in my opinion, is too far from the home to pose a high risk for a blockage and a backup to occur, unless the line is under some pretty heavy abusive situations where you're putting flushable wipes, grease, I mean, you name it, down the line. And wall, the grease buildup in the house here is very minimal. It's a very thin layer, and there's a pathway carved through the middle of it. And I usually don't recommend cleaning on grease until there's a continuous layer of it and throughout most of the entire sewer line. All the pipe we scoped there, all of it appears to be intact. Plastic pipe can settle quite significantly without breaking. It resists that very nicely. You know, if you've got a larger household, or the big things with standing water, obviously don't put wipes and paper towels down the line, stuff that doesn't disintegrate, and cooking oil and grease. Grease will build up anywhere in a sewer line, but it likes to do it more so at standing water because it hardens up when it hits water and it floats to the top of the water and starts to collect to the sidewalls. As this line sits right now, after all these years of usage, I can't even recommend a Hydrojet on it. The line is so clean. It would be silly. You'd be cleaning out a few scraps of toilet paper. So that doesn't make sense to go ripping up a length of pipe that long, that deep. The cost incurred in repairing this thing, I mean, there's just, from a cost-benefit standpoint, I'm not seeing much there at all. Anyhow, line has adequate flow all the way to the main lateral connection. All the pipe we've scoped here today, all of it is intact. Sewer line is functioning at this time. And I'll write this up on the report, and I talk to the extent that I do about these. Very few people out there have scoped as many sewer lines as I have. There's only about 4 or 5 in the state of Oregon, honestly. I'm doing it to the extent I am. When you sell the home, you have a very coherent explanation as to why that belly does not need repair. Realistically, to go and tear up a section of pipe that large, you're probably looking at 20 grand, if not better, $30,000. It makes no sense. Not when I can't even recommend a few $100 a drain cleaning on the line. The big thing is treat it nicely. If you have a really big household, or that I'm not going to go beating anyone up over the fact they dump some grease down the line here and there. It happens. I would rather see people deal with this periodically by doing a Hydrojet every few years for a few $100 to keep buildup down. If you have a household like that fair amount of grease and junk's going down the pipe. And this is a line, because of where that belly is situated that far from the house, it's still going to take quite a lot of abuse to ever get it to a point where it could block effectively enough and back all the way up to the house through all that diving and grading.